morning, everyone. Can you see me, hear me, and see my screen all right? If you can just confirm, that'll be great. Awesome. Thank you so much. So let's get started. So yesterday we discussed about the 6 different layers that constitute a context that we provide to large language model. So today we are into lecture 2. Today we'll be looking at one particular part of that, which is system prompt. So primarily system prompt in modern context engineering, for example, if you are using Cloud Code, it is primarily defined through CLAUDE.md file. So we will be spending most of the time today figuring out what is the most sort of scientific way to structure this markdown file so that you can get the best output out of your LLM. Now, just to reiterate the structure of this bootcamp, yesterday the 6 elements of the context was system prompt, user instructions, which is primarily what is optimized in prompt engineering, then tools, which will come as part of MCP, then memory or state, then RAG, which is for dynamic fetching of data from your knowledge base, and then conversation history. We briefly touched upon these and we saw the importance of each of these elements through the exercise. And today we are primarily focusing on this one part, which is system prompt. And tomorrow we will move into RAG. And day after tomorrow, we will move into tools or MCP. So there is one question from Ankit. How is memory different than conversation history? Aren't they the same? So conversation history is a lot more less persistent, whereas the memory part or state is more persistent. That's the primary difference. So to give an example, volume. I don't have a volume increase provision, but is my volume all right? My mic is as close to me as possible. Can you hear me? Okay, awesome. So to go back to the example of memory versus conversation history, let's say we are building an agent to respond to one single email in that particular thread. So in that thread, you are conversing with one person. And let's say the thread is such that already 25 exchanges have happened in the thread, right? So that history of what has happened in the thread, which is the 25 conversations corresponding to the current conversation, that will form part of the conversation history. However, that will not necessarily be part of the entire email agent's memory or state. It will not be a persistent memory. In persistent memory, the following things will be there. Because in persistent memory, your email preferences or the way you have replied to your emails in the last 1 year will be there. The way you respond to technical queries versus non-technical queries will be there. Those things will be concisely mentioned by taking, let's say, 10,000 or 5,000 different email exchanges that happened over 1 year. There is no particular reason these 6 elements are put in this particular order. This is not the order. The order is what we discussed yesterday. In the context, initially what goes, just to refresh your memory, what is the first part, what is the middle part, and what is the last part, if you can recollect what we discussed yesterday. First part is the system prompt, which forms the rules, guardrails, etc. Last part is the user prompt or user instructions. Everything in between will form RAG, output from tools, things related to memory or knowledge, etc. And just to reiterate on Ankit's question, yes, so short-term memory, conversation history is sort of, you can think of it as short-term memory. The 6 layers of context, you can actually expand to more layers because sometimes people like to add one more layer called agents. But I'm not doing it because in my opinion, agents is already have most of these things which are mentioned here is already part of agents. So I don't want to define one more additional layer called agent, right? But you can think of conversation history as not exactly as memory. This, if you call as state, which is a better word. This you can call as some sort of session memory. And this you can call as state. And state is defined based on knowledge base as well as what is stored in the memory markdown files or memory TXT files or XML files, right? So the order in which it appears in the context is what really matters, not the order in which how I have written here. The order in which it appears in the context is in this way. System has the highest priority because guardrails and rules are set here. User also has very high priority. And why do we put it at two extremes? Why don't we then put system and then user? If user has very high priority, why are we not putting it second? Because of the because to minimize lost in the middle effect. Because in the lost in the middle effect, people or let me just admit some people from the waiting room. In the lost in the middle effect, what happens is the most prominence given by LLM is to the starting and ending of the context window. Whatever is there in the middle of the context window, there is a slight lost in the middle effect whenever the context window size is bigger, right? So if an LLM has 1 million or 2 million as the context window size, try to keep the actual context length as 50K to 100K tokens. So now let's look at system prompt and how we construct the CLAUDE.md file if you were building using Claude Code. So the CLAUDE.md file typically have 5 components, which you will be able to identify when you look at the CLAUDE.md file in detail. So we will look at that in detail, but usually the 5 components are the identity of what you are doing with your Claude Code, or what you are doing with what you are building. So for example, if you are building an email response agent, who the model is, it will not say something like you are a senior code reviewer. You don't have to give like a anthropomorphic definition. It need not sound like a human. However, you should mention what this tool or what you are building is all about. This is an email responding agent, or this is my personal digital clone for responding to Slack messages. Or you can also say this is meant for maintaining a website which automatically updates whenever new things happen in the AI space. So who the model is, simply, it does not mean who the LLM is. Okay, please don't get confused by seeing the word model. It simply means whatever you are building and whatever you are defining in the Claude.md file, what is that meant for? It is meant to be used as a agent, or it is meant to be used as something for updating your website, or it is meant to be used as something which will respond to you on your behalf or schedule meetings on your behalf. Then rules are how you should execute certain things. For example, never use never respond about refund policy without looking at the policy document, or never use camel case, use snake case, or never store the points scored by a student if this has got something to do with a school or something. Never store the points scored by a student in more than 2 decimal points. So these are sort of like do's and don'ts, which will come as rules, and it will set the guardrails for the large language model to give you the output. So this is of the highest priority. If you look at these 5 things: identity, rules, format, knowledge, and rules. Even if you have extreme shortage of context, number of tokens in the context, rules will be the last thing which you will remove, because rules will set your guardrail. You might remove the rest of the things a little bit, but rules will be the final thing which you will remove. Then the format of how the LLM should respond is very important. Sometimes LLM is supposed to respond to you in Python code format. Sometimes it is supposed to respond to you in a natural language if you are using it as a chatbot, right? And sometimes LLM is supposed to create files for you, which could be like JSON files or something like that. So, and apart from all of this, often there are other format related specifications mentioned in Claude.md. For example, let's say you are constantly using an agent to build and redeploy a website whenever changes are happening, which means for a website deployment, you may follow certain code like npm run dev, or npm run build you will do, or npm run dev you will run. So if these are the commands that you are using to build, it can go in format as well as in knowledge. So sometimes, as I will ask you some questions, the boundaries between knowledge and format is a little bit fluid. It might confuse you what is knowledge and what is format. Sometimes the boundary between rules and knowledge is also a little bit confusing. Knowledge is more about what you do, or what you are trying to accomplish. Rules is more about how you do it. So in one line, you can say knowledge describes what reality of the application or what the reality of your agent is. Rules literally control their behavior. Rules define how they should or how they should not behave. And finally, tools will define in the cloud.md file. Tools will define what all tools or what all functions or what all libraries your agent or your large language model can get access to, or what all libraries will be referred to when the context is constructed for the large language model. Okay. So now to make all of this solid, what we can do is this we can do together. And this will mostly help you if you if you have Cloud Code. So you don't have to necessarily do it right now, but if you do it along with me, that will be even better. So just go to this website. So this is the landing page for Cloud Code, and they will give you this line of code to run in your terminal. Just copy it and run it in your terminal, and that should install Cloud Code for you. And to log into Cloud Code, let me just switch to my. Can you see my VS Code right now? Can anyone confirm if you are seeing my VS Code and not the Miro board? Okay, thank you. So now I have created like an empty working directory here. I will just delete everything right now. So it is completely empty. Nothing is there. And this is my working. Let me also delete this. So right now in my terminal, if you look at what is there, this is the present working directory, LLM Context Engineering. And if I try to list the items, it's basically empty. LS will list all the files in this working directory, and nothing is there. It's fully empty. Now, the way you use Cloud Code, you can use it in two ways. If you have installed Cloud Code, you can simply type Claude, CLAUDE. It should open within the terminal the chat box for talking with Claude. Okay. And here you can type anything, not to get you responses, but to take actions. So here you can say, create an empty file called CLAUDE.md. Then it should create a CLAUDE.md file, which will look empty. So basically, this agent has control over everything that is there in your working directory. So ideally, you will invoke these agents, a Cloud Code agent within the working directories where you have trust. So now you see, to take the action, it is asking you your permission. So then it's asking, do you want to make this edit to cloud.md? Yes. Or yes, allow all edits during this session. No. So often what you will notice is that when you are using Cloud Code, constantly you have to keep giving permissions. Even within this session, if you are performing a different task, it will again ask you permission, right? Which is a little bit annoying. It is a guardrail, of course. So if you are building something very sensitive, you keep the guardrail on. You do it this way. So I'll just give permission, yes. And you see a cloud.md file is created, which is empty. But let's say you are building something very big. If you're building something very big, it's very, very difficult to keep sitting in front of the system and keep on giving permission for every minor things that Cloud Code is building. So to prevent that, you can check this GitHub repo. It's not that popular. This GitHub repo is not extremely popular. But however, what it provides is something which can help you bypass constantly giving these permissions. So they give you the line using which you can install this CCO. They call it as a thin protective layer for Cloud Code. I don't know why this is not as popular as it should be, but it's very, very helpful for building something that will take a lot of time. So once you have CCO installed, you can invoke Cloud Code in a slightly different way. Let me just show you that. So I'll just exit this session /exit. So now I'm back to my terminal. And yeah, you can also do Claude allow dangerously skip permissions, but CCO is a better way to do that. So here, instead of typing Claude, you will type CCO. And then again, it will open Cloud Code, but with skip permissions enabled. But I think there are some guardrails present as well. Okay, so now if I ask it to do something, it can make changes in your folder. So now let's say I want to create a cloud.md file for a RAG chatbot that I'm building. So I'll just give minimum instruction. Okay, I am, let me make sure that my context is completely clear. So I just cleared my context with /clear. So my context is fully empty. So if I say /context, I think /context should help me visualize the context if I'm not wrong. Yeah. So this is the visualization of the context. So total, I have 200K tokens, out of which 9% is gone. And here it shows where those tokens are gone. In system prompt, some tokens are gone. This is not the system prompt where I have defined cloud.md. Cloud.md is literally empty. But this is within the system prompt because Cloud Code uses a lot of agents, right? This 200K tokens are not consumed just based on what I give, but it is also consumed by Cloud Code agents, which Cloud Code helps deploys whenever you try to execute a task. So this 18K tokens are by default consumed, not because I have done something, but because Cloud Code has already deployed certain agents, and that will consume some context. Now we will track this context usage visualization as we go ahead. So now what I'm going to do is I will say, I want to build a RAG chatbot, make CLAUDE.md file for this. So as you know, this is the worst kind of prompt I can give. As a user, I am being extremely lazy. I am not that. First of all, you don't have to directly make cloud.md file because you are not really good at doing that. But you can give detailed instructions so that Claude itself can create the cloud.md file. So here, this is my one-line instruction. I want to build a RAG chatbot, make cloud.md file for this. So this is too vague. It's too useless. And let's see what Claude will now do. So last time when I tried this, what Claude did was it had no idea what my preferences as a user is. So it asked me for my preferences, like, would you like to use LangChain? Would you like to use ChromaDB for the database, etc. Right? But I don't know what it is going to do right now. Let's wait and see. I think it's directly writing. I'm not sure why my preferences are not asked. Perhaps the preferences which I had. Yeah. So there are so many inherently defined skills in a dot skills folder which is installed globally, and from there are a lot of slash commands, slash init, or if you are working on project roadmap development, you can define commands like /prd, using which you can invoke project roadmap development. But here they have already directly created the cloud.md file. Let's look at the structure of this markdown file. So here it says project overview. And in the project overview, it says a retrieval augmented generation chatbot that answers users' questions by retrieving relevant context. So this is out of the 5 elements that I showed you in the Miro board: identity, rules, format, knowledge, and tools. What do you think this is? This project overview is what? Is it identity? Is it knowledge? Is it rules? This is sort of like identity, right? Here we are not saying identity as per you are a programmer or you are a chatbot with these human characteristics. That's not necessarily the case. You don't have to say give such human form, but identity is basically what this project is all about. This project is all about a RAG-based chatbot for responding to whatever queries. Then there is something about tech stack, and it mentions the programming language, large language model to use, embeddings, vector database, framework, API, etc. Out of the 5 things mentioned here, what do you think this tech stack is more close to? Is it tools? Is it knowledge? Is it format? Is it rules? Out of these, it's definitely not identity, right? Identity is already mentioned over here. So in my opinion, tech stack is a combination of 2 things. So first of all, in this project, what do you think would be the tools? Tools will ultimately be the packages, libraries which you will use, or if there are functions which are written, what you will use, or APIs that you will use. Those are at the end of the day tools, right? So in the tech stack, when you say that it's Cloud API, you are saying this is one of the tools that you should use. When you are saying ChromaDB, it is another tool, LangChain or Llama Index. These are all defining certain tools. But at the same time, it's also providing knowledge, right? It's saying the large language model should be Python, LLM should be Claude based. So that is the reason why earlier I said sometimes the boundary between knowledge and tools, or sometimes the boundary between rules and knowledge, are very thin. But here, essentially, you will find a combination of tools as well as knowledge. What about this? What about this project structure, which is the SRC folder of the project, in which different subfolders are there? In each subfolder, there are .py files. That will be the format, right? What is the format in which we are structuring this project? Then let's now look at another part. How about this retrieval quality? Out of these 5, identity, rules, format, knowledge, and tools, this is definitely not identity, right? This is also definitely not output format. And this is not necessarily tools, because we are not necessarily talking about tools or APIs here. So it's again a thin boundary between rules and knowledge. Here, you can think of rules as the following. Whenever you say how to do something, it's about rules. Whenever you say what to do, or what the thing should look like, what your tool, what abilities your tool possess, those are knowledge. So when you say start with cosine similarity, it's coming closer to rules, but it's arguable, right? One can also argue that, oh, this can also be considered as knowledge. But generally speaking, as a thumb rule, if you say, hey, never use as a chatbot, never say I don't know. If you say something like that somewhere in this markdown file, that is coming as part of rule. It's not a knowledge. But if you are saying whenever there is any mention about refund, look at the refund policy document. There again, it's a combination between rule and knowledge. So just look at this. How about this? Prompt engineering, system prompt defines this, retrieved context is injected, instruct the LLM to. In general, is this closer to rules, or is this closer to knowledge? Is this saying how to do something, or is this saying something like how things should be? This is more closer to knowledge, like in the sense that system prompt define chatbots rules on consent. This is not this. Look at this line. This line is not saying how to do something. It is just talking about what the reality may look, what the some specifications about the chatbot looks like, right? Retrieved context is injected with source with source attribution. This is again not like, it's not mentioned as a rule, it's mentioned as a knowledge. Okay, some students are waiting to join. Let me just actually, there is no one in the waiting room. Currently, it's empty. All right. Now, what else? Let's look at format. Identity. We discuss rules, format, knowledge, tools. Yeah. So I think this and how about this? Develop commands. What are these in your opinion? Is this you can see that there might be a thin boundary between knowledge and tools. In my opinion, this is more about knowledge, because here we are not explicitly saying these are the tools that are used, but in fact, there are 3 things coming here. One is format, the format not of the output, but the format of how to run the server, or how to put the server into local deployment. So some format is being specified, but some knowledge is also there, because this section of the CLAUDE.md file gives your large language model knowledge about the development commands. All right. And what about this? Where does this come? Environment variables. Is this a rule? This is not rule. This is not identity. This is not, let's say, tools. This is knowledge. This is knowledge about environment variables. Either you provide it here itself, or you put, I mean, you usually don't provide it here, but you are saying that environment variables will look something like this in the .env file. So usually the way you store env files are you create a .env and you have something like this. Let's say these are the APK, sorry, not APK, API keys, and you put the API keys here, right? So this is how .env is structured. And usually you will also have a .gitignore so that you are not, and then you should mention .env file in the gitignore, and only then you will ensure that .env files are not pushed into the GitHub. Okay, there is one thing. This is very confusing. How to put various components into what bucket? Exactly. It's not a sharp boundary between what is a rule and what's a knowledge. And as I always say, uh, LLM context engineering is not physics. It is more thumb rules, more things which has evolved because big companies have experimented a lot and things have been figured out. Because community has built guidelines and suggestions. So there is a sort of a boundary between. It's not a hard boundary between what can constitute knowledge and what can constitute rules. That's also one reason why in the website I have mentioned the art of context engineering, not the science of context engineering, because it's not strictly a science. But right, do we need to force everything into these buckets when they don't fit so well? So this is the exact great question, Sankalp. That is the reason why I showed this example. Just tell me, look at the command which I had given. In my command, did I mention anywhere how the cloud.md should be structured? The only command which I gave was, I want to build a RAG chatbot. For this, make the cloud.md markdown file, right? But the way Cloud itself constructed it is in such a way that your markdown file ended up having structures which follow each of these sub elements. Now I will show you another way in which you can construct the markdown file in an even better way. Okay, so let me switch my workspace. So this is another workspace which I recently built as part of building the AI developments tracker. So I'm building a website for tracking the developments which are latest happening in the AI space on GitHub, Archive, Hugging Face, then X.com and LinkedIn and Reddit. So what I did here was, I knew that for this project, markdown file is extremely important. So I did not want to make it myself directly. I also did not want to give a 1 line or 2 line commands in the terminal to create it. So what I did was, just look at this document, ideas.md. So in this ideas.md, what I did is, I just added my requirements in long natural language text, right? You can see the ideas.md, right? I hope I'm showing you the correct tab. I hope the tab switching has worked for you. Okay. So in this ideas.md, so my usual workflow is I use this software called Whisper Flow. The spelling is this, WISPR fellow W. So if I press my function key on my, I use a MacBook. So if I press function key, it is activated. Then what my speech will be converted to text. So usually I have a lot of requirements in my brain. I have to somehow put it as fast as possible onto some document. So I just put all my ideas in this ideas.md. But this is highly unstructured. I did not want Cloud to use this unstructured ideas.md to create a structured cloud.md file. So what I did is I asked Cloud to first create a version 2 of ideas v2.md, which is a structured version of ideas.md. Now, this may look very similar to cloud.md, but I did not explicitly ask ask Cloud Code to create a cloud.md file, but rather I asked to convert ideas.md into a little bit more structured format with subheadings. So this hash or double hash are all subheadings. How do you know? I have installed a plugin. I'll just show you this in the preview. So this is how the markdown file, if you have any markdown preview extension installed on VS Code. So I have installed this extension called, I forgot the name of that. Yeah, this one. So this extension I have installed on VS Code, Markdown Preview Enhanced. So if I'm on a Markdown file, all I need to do is, so if this is ideas.md, I want to see as a proper preview, I can just plus Command Shift V, then it will open this preview in this nice way. But here you see this is very unstructured. But the ideas v2.md that Cloud Code created is much more structured with headings and subheadings. Let me just show you that. See, this is much more structured. Then what I did is this ideas.md, the problem is this ideas v2.md probably will not follow this structure, which is ideal for cloud.md. So then what I did is I asked in my terminal to keep track of what is there in ideas v2.md and then use ideas v2.md to create the cloud.md. So Ankita has asked, you created ideas.md to v2 with cloud. Yes, exactly. I use cloud to convert into the structured v2 format. And then using the v2 format, I use cloud.md. And that's the reason why in the first part of the cloud.md, in the identity of the model, it says it refers to ideas v2.md. So ideas v2.md provides the full context of what this project is. And then the rest of the details like, and this project overview is also identity, but then the rest of the section, tech stack, or this project structure will give the structure. Tech stack will give idea about the tools that I will use. It's also partly knowledge. Then you will also see the development phases. So this is sort of like knowledge because I am going to develop this tool in different phases. First, it will be a single user minimum viable product. Then I will, are you using Cloud Code in VS Code? Yes, I am using Cloud Code in VS Code. So, I mean, I have a Cloud Code extension in VS Code, but right now I am not using that. I'm using it in my terminal only. So this Cloud Code extension also you can get from here. Go to VS Code extensions and type Cloud Code. This you can install, but I personally have not used this Cloud Code extension as much as I'm using it in terminal. So in VS Code, you can open terminal by pressing Command J. So Command J means it will close, Command J means it will open. So this is my terminal, right? And to open Cloud Code here, you can either type Cloud or you can type CCO if you have CCO installed, right? So this is a better workflow to create cloud.md files with the help of Cloud itself. And but instead of directly creating the cloud.md with very minimum instructions like what I did here for this RAG chatbot, I barely gave any instruction. And because of that reason, I'm pretty sure this cloud.md, like whatever I build after beyond this cloud.md will not be very good because I have not given anything about my preferences, right? Can we compare this to the plan mode in Cursor where you speak and keep planning? And once the plan is ready, the agents start working. Yeah. So Cursor or GitHub Copilot, that main difference is the way in which these coding agents handle the context. So I have used Cursor a little bit, but the most amount of time I have spent are on Copilot. So till Cloud Code, I was spending time on Copilot. And then after that, I switched to Cloud Code. And once I switched to Cloud Code, I have never used anything else. So yeah, just to reiterate, Ankit, so first you took note of your raw thoughts, yes, and then used a V2 version, I mean, another version to structure my raw thoughts into a structured version, and then use that into Cloud Code. Yes, exactly. All right. So now let's go back. So Anthropic has this idea about what should be written in Cloud Code, and that is written in I think there is a nice article about context engineering Anthropic. There is a very nice article. Just I will share this again in the course dashboard, but this is a short article which I recommend everyone to read. This was again sometime in the end of last year, yeah, September 29, 2025. Effective context engineering for AI agents. This article had become very popular. It's actually not that long, but there are many sub articles which are linked within this article. So just go through this article at least once, okay? So Anthropic has this suggestion of idea of right altitude. So the right altitude simply means when you are giving examples in Cloud Code of what to do or what not to do, do not stay. Oh, link I have not pasted. Yeah. Did you get the link? Okay, just a second. My Wacom is not loading. Yeah. So the principle of Anthropic's Cloud Code construction is you should neither be too high in your instructions and nor be too low. And what is too high and too low? Too high means too vague. Too low means too specific. So if you are looking at something that is lying on the ground, when you are standing on the ground, you see all the minor details of it. So you should not be writing in Cloud Code something like, if a user says how much, if a user asks how much, reply, our plans start at $9.99 per month for basic. Can anyone tell me why this is not a good idea? why can't you add something like this in Claude.md file? Like, why exactly is this a problem? The problem is because it is too specific. This, what if your pricing changes next week? Many changes can happen to your products or pricing. Anything can happen. And Claude.md is one such files that will almost not change once you finalize. The lifespan of Claude.md file is months. So if your project development is weeks or months, throughout that time span, your Claude.md file will almost remain constant. So for example, this Claude.md, which I initially built for building the AI development tracker, it has not changed from the first version because the basic ideas which I had in my mind, they haven't changed. In this ideas.md, although I have mentioned some specific things like, where is that? I think I had mentioned, yeah, for example, I had mentioned that you have to check GitHub repo, x.com, LinkedIn. These are specific. What if some other platform also I need to track, right? So Claude.md should ideally mention, look at some platforms like this, or track some people, some famous people who are working in AI. But then later, if some changes need to be made, just provide a provision for that. So Claude.md should never say, these are the buckets that I am always looking at. It should never say something like that. It should say, broadly look at social media sites with LinkedIn as an example, Reddit as an example, or x.com as an example, right? So there is one question. If we update the ideas incrementally, then will idea v2 and Claude also update? No, not by default. Automatically, it will not get updated. I have to explicitly say that. So my entire goal is I don't want the Claude.md files to keep on changing. It's not a dynamic document. That this document acts as the foundation. Now, I'll give you one example when something changed, as Rakesh has asked. What if some rules change? If some rules change, of course, it has to reflect in the Claude.md, right? Because rules are like guardrails, or it should be loaded in every single API call, because the rules should never be broken. So if you want something to be never broken, you have to load it in your Claude.md. Now I have another question. Right now, my Claude.md for this is how many lines? 300 or 400 lines or something like that. Yeah. 250, 265 lines. Okay. What if this Claude.md file was, let's say, 5,000 lines? 5,000 lines, and let's say each line consists of 10 words, right? And then this will be, or 10 or 8 words, and then this will be 5K, 50K words. 50K words is approximately equal to one. If we say one word equal to one token, it's 50K tokens. Now just tell me, do you think the entire Claude.md is loaded at once into the context? Is the entire Claude.md always loaded into the context? So there are two issues here. Okay, first of all, Claude.md should not be 5,000 lines. It should be something like 200 to 500 lines, not more than that. That's the first thing. And even then, let's say each line is like 5 to 10 words. This can be anywhere between maybe 2K to, or 1K to 3K words, which is 1K to 3K tokens approximately. One word is, I mean, each token is 3/4 of a word. So that is one thing. This we should follow. Second thing is Claude.md is not entirely loaded all at once. Okay, that is something we should understand. What is usually done is parts of Claude.md, which are the most important, are always loaded. The remaining parts are loaded as and when is needed. And how do you do that? So which parts will always be loaded? If there are parts which mention about rules, that will always be loaded into the context for every single API call. But which are the parts which may not be loaded always? So let us look at this Claude.md. Let's say we are working on phase 1. Do we have to load this phase 2 description, or do we have to load something which describes phase 3 if there is a phase 3? It need not be loaded. So what is usually done is, to pick the relevant sections from Cloud Code, either we can use RAG. So Claude.md is converted into chunks. Chunks are converted, stored in a vector database, and then users query along with the rest of the context is converted into vectors, and then those vectors are compared against the embedded vectors, and then relevant portions from the or relevant chunks from the CLAUDE.md are fetched and they are passed into the final context. That is if you want to use RAG. There is an even simpler approach, right? Even simpler approach is just using keyword. So if you are currently working in phase 1 using keyword matching, you can figure out that a section that comes under this triple hash. So that's the reason why this markdown document format is very useful, because anything that comes under this heading, this triple hash means it's a heading of style. Let me show you, of this style, phase 1 single user MVP. So anything that comes under this heading is one section. So then if I use keyword matching, I can just simply load this section fully when I'm working on phase 1. I can ignore everything else, right? So this is how you ensure that your context is not, every single API call is not unnecessarily costing you a lot of money if CLAUDE.md has a lot of details which you don't have to use every single time, right? There is a question, Cloud Code internally must be doing RAG. We did not have to do it. Exactly. We don't have to internally implement, we don't have to explicitly implement it. It's already implemented internally. So these are some examples of too high or too vague commands and too low or too brittle commands. So if it's about customer pricing, be helpful with pricing questions, extremely vague. But if you mention the exact pricing, like $299, $29.99 or $9.99, it's also too specific. What you should ask is when what you should write is, when asked about pricing, check the pricing database first. If no exact match, suggest the closest plan. Again, look at this, handle errors gracefully. Very vague. If you get orders, if get orders, order function returned 404, order not found, please check the order number and try again. This is again too specific and too brittle, because this is not the only error that can occur when the get order function is called. When a tool call fails, explain what happened in plain language, suggest one alternative. Right. So this right altitude is something like you are neither too specific and nor vague. I know one thing which I often use in a vague way. I sometimes say, do not hallucinate. Then I myself keep thinking I am talking about context engineering and I am writing the most vague thing which you can ever write, right? So I'm sure all of us have some habits like that. It's completely useless. It doesn't matter if we say don't hallucinate. It's not useful at all. So just keep this in mind when you are constructing any sort of instructions for the large language model in the context. So now we already discussed some of these things about system prompt organization. So actually there are two formats in which system prompt can be organized. So ideally, Claude apparently prefers, this is not something which I have tried myself and tested. I don't have results to show. But based on my reading, what I have understood is that Claude typically prefers XML documents with these tags. So anything under the identity section will be coming under this opening and closing tag. So this is the identity opening tag, closing tag, opening tag, closing tag, right? This is one option. Second option is the markdown file. And in general, the general consensus is that although such a preference is mentioned in certain documentation, the difference between using an XML document and using a markdown document, so CLAUDE.md document, is not at all remarkable or not really perceivable. And for some reasons, many other models typically prefer markdown files. So okay, there is one question, is CLAUDE.md the right file name or agent.md? I'll come to that. They are two different files. I'll come to what's the difference between CLAUDE.md and agent.md. So the format that, in my opinion, which you should use is not XML. Just go with markdown file so that it's a little bit more universal and there is no perceivable difference in the quality of output. And this is also structured. The hash will tell that everything coming under everything after hash in the same line is a heading. Everything coming under that is coming under that heading until you encounter another hashed statement, which is another heading. If there are double hash, that's the next hierarchy of heading. If it is triple hash, that is the next hierarchy of heading. So the same thing which you can construct using this XML document, you can also construct using markdown document. All right. Then there is another idea which usually we don't follow that much, is start minimal and then keep adding into the CLAUDE.md document. I'll show you one example of what it means. So let's say we are building a customer support agent. Okay. What I earlier mentioned was, okay, there is one question. I was planning to read that XML is preferred. That is one additional thing to remember. Yeah. It's not at all something which will break your model or anything. You can continue using CLAUDE.md or markdown files. So one thing which I rarely follow, but which is something that is preferred, is building the CLAUDE.md file in a sequence of few steps. So what they say is, if you define all the rules at once, what may happen is, if you have 10 different rules, which you have defined, or 20 different rules, what may happen is rule number 1 and rule number 20 may contradict each other. It can happen when you tell so many constraints, some of the constraints might be contradictory. So what is the general way of constructing the CLAUDE.md file is, do not mention every single rule, mention one or few at a time. Then after mentioning a few at a time, try building and see what are the issues in your development. And then based on the issues, build the CLAUDE.md file until a point where you are satisfied with it. And then once that level is reached, use that CLAUDE.md file as your file for the rest of your building process. So this is an example. This figure is showing you an example. Let's say we are building a customer support agent for Shopco, a random company name. And you will start with a minimal prompt. Minimal prompt is something like this: you are a customer support agent for Shopco. That's it, a minimal prompt. Then this prompt will introduce some failure. The failure might be on a return policy. The model might hallucinate saying something like, uh, hey, as a customer, you are eligible for return. Here is the return after 1 day or after 30 days. But then you will realize that, oh, that is not ideal. The model has to look at the policy document before taking a decision. Then what do? You add one additional sentence. Use the provided tools for actions. Do not guess. If you just added do not guess, it will not be very helpful. You have to say, and this is a very simplified prompt, okay? Obviously, the CLAUDE.md will not be simple like this. It will say which tools you should look at if you want to look at the policy document. So use the provided tools for actions. And if you have any doubt about return policy, look at the return policy document. Do not guess the return policy. And then you will run again. And then when you run again, this time it may approve a refund. This is another failure. It may approve a refund outside the window. Then you will say, okay, this is the first initial prompt, minimum prompt, which you had already given. Then this was the second prompt, which you had added. Use the provided tools for actions. Do not guess. Then last thing which you have added is returns must be done within 30 days window. Then again, when you run, you may say like process damaged item as a standard return. Then you will have to add something like damaged item require different routing. So the good thing about doing something like this is you are less likely to add something contradictory in your own the base document. Whereas if you add everything like what I have done here, you may end up contradicting yourself, which is very likely. So I have already read my CLAUDE.md for my AI development tracker website throughout. And I hope there is no contradiction here because I have read through this once. So the least which you can do is either iterate and build like what the start minimal, then add policy says, or build the CLAUDE.md file and don't be lazy. Read through it once properly. Okay. Make sure that there are no contradictions. Make sure that rules are not contradicting each other. Sometimes user preferences may contradict the rules. Like to give an example, the rule may say the refund should be done. The refund window must be within 30 days. But then in the user preferences, the user might have said something like, if a customer is asking for refund, always check the legitimacy of the case, and always if it is legitimate, provide the refund. But then the model will get confused. The model will not know what to do. I mean, it will take an action, but then it's not clear, right? Should it follow the refund policy or should it follow the user's instruction? So you should construct this in a sequential way. We will do this in one of the exercises today. And these are some of the configuration files that other platforms use. So in CLAUDE.md is there. You might have one question. If you are using, let's say, Codex, can CLAUDE.md work? CLAUDE.md is not by default referred to in Codex, but you can create similar markdown files which Codex uses. Or in Cursor, you can use .cursor/rules. In GitHub Copilot also, Copilot instructions.md you can create. This I am yet to come to. Agents.md I am yet to come to. Okay, so this we will see. So Shamim is asking anything for Kimi. So Kimi, you are asking specific to the Kimi model. Is that what you're asking? Kimi K2 or something like that? So by default, we're not talking about models, right? So here in Claude, it's mostly Anthropic's models, but in Cursor, you can use different models. In Copilot, you can use different models. In Windsurf also, you can use different models. So if you are using these model agnostic coding platforms, then I'm pretty sure it does not change. It need not be Kimi specific. However, if you are using CLAUDE.md, ideally it is best suited for Anthropic's models. It's not best suited for Kimi or Quen or other models, right? So if you are using those models, and for coding agent you are using Cursor or let's say Windsurf or Copilot, then for sure I don't think you need to make any extra changes. You can follow whatever the general um, rule is. If you want to store something in Copilot instructions.md, I'm not an expert in this, but I am an expert in this and this. I can talk about that more. GitHub Copilot I have used extensively, but I have realized that one thing, that the way in which Copilot handles context is not as good as Cloud Code handles context. In Cloud Code, it has a global context because there is a file which it installs, something like //cloud. Okay, this is something like a global file, but then there is also a file which is local, which you will see after you install, like /.cloud. So I can show you my Cloud file if it is there in this. For example, this is my .cloud file, okay, and this is my agents file. So inside, okay, I'll come to the .agents in a little bit. Why is there nothing related to Gemini? Same, because the coding agents, see, we have to understand two differences. Coding agent is different, LLM is different, right? Gemini has different LLMs. Kimi is a LLM, Quen LLM, Opus 4.6 is an LLM. So right now, the Claude Code is not an LLM. Claude Code is a coding agent which is built on top of LLMs by Anthropic. You can use Opus, Sonnet, or Haiku, any LLM within the suite of LLMs provided in Anthropic. Now the question is, there are two questions here: which LLM is the best, and which coding agent is the best? So in my opinion, right now, among all the existing coding agents, Cloud Code or Codex are the best. Rest of the coding agents you can try, but I'm not sure how advanced they are compared to these two. Also, for fair reasons, these two companies are like, I think OpenAI is now $800 billion, and Anthropic is, I think, somewhere close to $350 billion or $400 billion. Of course, they have a lot more resources than other companies to build. I don't know whether Google offers something as good as these, but my opinion is, if you want to use other large language models, and not Anthropic or not OpenAI models, yes, go ahead with Windsurf or Copilot or Cursor, does not matter. But if you are anyway going with Anthropic models or OpenAI models, go with Codex or go with Cloud Code. Now, so you might have a question like, what is universal? If CLAUDE.md is not universal, what is universal? So one thing that is universal is this agents.md. So it is emerging as a universal standard simply because Linux Foundation has pioneered it, and they are mainly open source. So agents.md structure is the following. I will show you one example in my document. So here there is a dot agent, and inside this dot agent, I don't have agents.md here, but I have skill.md. So what these define is, these are sub agents with different skills. So agents.md, earlier somebody had asked what's the difference between CLAUDE.md and agents.md. You can have so many different agents.md folders which define what each of the sub agents do. So if you have agent number A, which performs a broader level task, let's say you are writing a research paper. Okay, let's say you have a research paper writing agent with its own agents.md file, which orchestrates your entire research activity. But you could have a sub agent inside this which has only ability to write. So you will have a writing agent who will have its own agents.md file. And what will happen is, now this agent is, the way your folder structure is defined will be such that for your overall research, your agents.md will be here. Inside this, you will have a folder called, let's say, writing. Inside the writing folder, you will have its own agents.md file. What will happen is you will have defined bunch of instructions in this agents.md, right? And you will have another set of instruction in this agents.md. What has happened is this and this both will be utilized in the context. And whatever is mentioned in this specific instruction, if it is conflicting with this for whatever reason, whatever is mentioned in this in the lowest point of hierarchy, that will be utilized. For example, this agents.md is utilized only while writing, right? So when you are writing, something that is mentioned in this agents.md and something that mentioned in this agents.md, if they are kind of conflicting or something, instructions provided by this is used. But if nothing is conflicting, instructions provided in both are used. So agents.md, you will define multiple because you will have multiple sub agents for executing one single task. You could have a sub agent for writing. You could have a sub agent for making figures. You could have a sub agent for executing code or going to run pod and executing the code. You will have a sub agent for analyzing the files, right? And maybe there could be another agent which orchestrates both of this, writing the code as well as analyzing the results. You could have an orchestrator sub agent. So agent is like if you think of it, it's like a tree. There is a master agent which orchestrates everything. Under this, you could have 4 different agents with its own context. And under maybe this agent, there could be 2 other sub agents with its own context. And these agent.md, just like CLAUDE.md, will define what this agent is supposed to do, right? Now, what is the difference now between agent.md and skill.md? I will show you the skill.md. Let's go to a skill for this front end patterns. Okay. So I will show you the skill.md file for this. So this will define the skills that the model should have in natural language when it comes to front end development. So here it simply talks about what are some preferences. So you yourself can create the skill.md by saying, I prefer modern styled website. I don't like thick fonts. I generally like to use thin font which are elongated. Or you can say something like use Next.js instead of React.js. You can mention all these preferences here to create the skill.md. You can also mention no preferences. Still, skill.md can be created by Cloud Code. One more option you have is this skills.sh or something. There is a website which is like a marketplace for many different skills. There was one more website which I was frequently using to download skills directly from internet. Place for agents. I'm not sure if it is this. Yeah, this one. So this is also another good one. So if you want to find a skill while building, let's say, to give an example, let's say you are making an agent for making figures using paper. So maybe, or you for a PowerPoint presentation. So then you can search PowerPoint here, and it should ideally load. I'm sure there are some skills that are written for PowerPoint specific. So automating PowerPoint.md. So see, this is a markdown document. Let me just verify. So this is a markdown document which you can directly install using this npx skills command, or you can download and add it manually to your workspace. Or if you are using Manus agent, you can directly run this. But basically, the good thing is here you will see stars and upvotes, knowing how popular this particular skill is. So if you look at some skills like front end, you will see that large number of upvotes are there or stars are there. Where do I go back? So this link I will just share in the chat once. Just check this. So this is one way in which you can, directly get the skills which other people have defined. There is one more GitHub repo which I want to show you, which will be very, very helpful to you. It's called Everything Cloud Code. So this GitHub, this has, I think, 50K stars or something like that. Yeah, 69K now. So this GitHub was created by, I think, somebody, I think I'm referring to the correct GitHub repo, somebody who won a hackathon. And yeah, so this was created by some person and now it is maintained by, I think, more than one people. Basically, one thing you can do is in any GitHub, any Cloud Code project, you can install this. And then what will happen is this everything Cloud Code will get installed inside your working directory, as you can see here. So this I did not create myself. I took it from this GitHub repo. I forked it and then, or I directly used this command rather. There is this command mentioned to install the plugin, and that plugin will appear in your working directory. Now, the usual convention is my working directory is actually this AI developments tracker. It is not everything Cloud Code. So the usual convention is your .agents and .cloud, everything should ideally be over here immediately inside the working directory, not inside a subdirectory. But I have explicitly mentioned in my markdown files that the skills and .agents, everything can be found inside this subdirectory. I have mentioned it explicitly, because of which, if any skills are needed, Cloud Code can refer to these skills, API design or article writing, backend, or any skill, right? But otherwise, by default, Cloud will look at .cloud folder, .cloud file over here itself, which will be like a hidden folder. You will not be directly seeing it if you open it in a Finder. Where did you mention this in CLAUDE.md? I think it is mentioned. Let me just check where it is saved. I think it is not stored in my CLAUDE.md related to this particular project. I think it is saved, that preference is stored in my global CLAUDE.md file. So there are two CLAUDE.mds any project will refer to. One is the project specific CLAUDE.md. Second is the global CLAUDE.md, which will apply to all the projects. So some skills you may want to apply to all the projects. For example, if it's a web development skill, why would you restrict it to just one project? It can be applied to all the projects. So you can install it in such a way that it is applied to all the projects. The best way to do that is, in my case, I have one folder called, I'll show you on my Miro board. So I have one folder called AI Agents, which acts as my parent working directory. Okay, inside this, I have different projects. So inside this, I may have a project called, let's say, LLM Context Engineering, or I may have another project called AI Developments Tracker. So in this AI Agents folder, I will have a .cloud.md file, which will define my preferences, and a folder inside which there will be a cloud.md file. Similarly, inside this also .cloud will be there, inside which there will be cloud.md. Now this cloud.md and whatever skill.md I'm defining inside this working directory is specific to this working directory. So if I define some writing skills or email skills or whatever, it will not get universally applied. But whatever I apply in my master directory, master working directory, will get applied universally for all the projects. So some skills, if some writing preferences or something you are mentioning, I don't want my writing preferences to be mentioned in all my projects. I want it to be project specific. So I will not mention any writing related skill.md files in my master working directory. I will only mention it in my project specific working directory. So these are just conventions. You guys can figure out if you don't want to follow that convention and still get something useful out of it. Okay, this we have covered. Anatomy of, okay, by the way, agents.md and cloud.md should follow similar things. In agents.md, there will be very explicit mention of the tools. In cloud.md also, there are broad mentions of the tools, but in agents.md, because agent is literally meant for accessing tools and executing certain functions, agents.md will have a lot more emphasis on specific tools. This is one diagram which I wanted to show you the order in which things may disappear from your context. So think about output from RAG, okay? Output from RAG is extremely dynamic. It does not appear after 2 or 3 iterations of API calls of the LLM, because RAG output depends on the current context. So RAG output will live only for a few seconds, whatever output you get. So that contribution of RAG output to the context is very short-lived. On the other hand, as I mentioned earlier, cloud.md or agents.md literally will be there unchanged in your working directory from weeks to months. So in my case, okay, there is one question. Cloud Code will leverage both agents.md and cloud.md. Yes, exactly. It has both. Sometimes you will notice that when you are running a big project, Cloud Code will automatically spin sub agents. Sometimes you can define your own subagents, and sometimes it will spin its own subagent. Now, can I ask you a question? Will subagent have its own context window, or will it utilize the context window which is same as its parent, the parent agent who spun the subagent? Will they share the context window, or will it have its own context window? So just think about it. Why are we first of all, what is an agent? An agent has its own ability to make its own API call to the LLM. It has its own ability to access files separately and produce outputs that purely depend on its own context. So a sub-agent ideally will have its own context window. It will make a separate API call, and think about it. For each API call, we are providing the context, right? And which means if an agent is a pure paper writing agent, why should that agent share the context with a coding agent? It's not needed. So the whole idea when we say agents are being this we will discuss more in detail when we comes to the tool section, which is day after tomorrow. But when we are spinning new agents, the idea is that that agent should have ability to execute its own API call of the same LLM, right? And handle its own context window, so that that agent's actions are not polluted by what is happening globally in the project. So globally, if the research is progressing in a certain direction, that should not affect a particular agent's ability to analyze a particular result, right? So sub agents will always have its own context window, but some items will be shared between the context window, because, for example, CLAUDE.md will always be there, accessible to every single agent. Then if there are things like specifications of features, so I had mentioned my feature specifications, and then it created certain skill.md files based on my feature specifications, right? But those skill.md files kept on getting modified as I asked for more and more features, or more and more different skills my AI news tracker should have. So the lifespan, this is very correct actually. Hours to days is actually something that I have observed in my execution. The skill.md file may stay for hours. Some skill.md file will stay for days, but it can get heavily modified as we ask for more and more specification and more skills. Implementation plan is hours to days. So implementation plan, there is one thing here. This implementation plan, there is a broader level phase 1, phase 2 implementation plan mentioned in CLAUDE.md. So here, if I go back to AI developments tracker, this CLAUDE.md has a phase 1 implementation plan, then phase 2 multi-user implementation plan, right? So this was remaining constant throughout. But however, I created different set of markdown files called app feedback v1.md. So here what I did is, in natural language, just by speaking, I created these instructions based on what the app is looking at currently. So this app feedback v1.md will spin off its own different phases. So then it will decide, okay, I am in phase 1 right now, but I have to implement phase 1A, phase 1B, phase 1C. So it's a new implementation plan. And the life of that new implementation plan will depend on what your current feedback is, what features are you focusing right now, etc. Again, its time span is hours to days. And then as I keep on giving different feedback at different levels of my product development, no, app feedback.md is not a skill. Skills are usually stored in skill.md. App feedback v1.md is my own document which I created. You know why I created? Because if I'm giving this much feedback, I might as well store it somewhere rather than giving it in terminal. Because if I give it in terminal, after some time it's gone. But this way, all my preferences and all my feedback is stored in these markdown files. Sometimes my feedback in V1 may conflict with something in V5, but later, once my building is completely done, I'm planning to ask Cloud Code to create a master feedback document using all my 5 feedbacks documents. And that so to create the master feedback document, I need all my feedbacks which I have given in all different stages, right? So that's the only reason why I created this MD file. What are we achieving with separating everything? So actually, yeah, I think this was a mistake on my end. I don't think separating the everything cloud code is a good practice. Ideally, what we should do is just have all these folders within the working directory. So that is better, right? We are not achieving anything, I think, by separating. This was the only reason was because when I installed installed the plugin, it ended up installing it in this way. And then I went ahead creating my CLAUDE.md. And then I realized that, oh, my .cloud and .agents are actually inside a subdirectory. Now, should I move it back or should I continue building? Then I continued building, but I ensured that Claude is referring to the .cloud in this subfolder and .agents in this subfolder, right? But we are not achieving anything by separating these two. Oh, there is actually one more file which I think you should know about. There is another file called soul.md. This is something which, if you have been reading on x.com, many people talk about soul. The difference between your output when you have a soul.md versus when you don't have a soul.md is night and day. It's highly different. So in Claude code, I don't specifically use sol.md because my Claude.md itself is doing the function of sol.md. But in general, if you're working on OpenClaw or other frameworks, just remember to put a sol.md and put what your agent is supposed to be like, the details of that in the sol.md. The difference is extremely humongous. Okay, one last thing, then we can get into the exercise, is about classification tasks, reasoning task, or some other structured output task. Okay, so 3 tasks I have mentioned here because in Claude.md, it's a good practice to mention some examples. So let's say you are performing a classification. Let's say you are building an email classification into whether an incoming email should go into your primary inbox or whether your incoming email should go into the rest of the inbox, like social updates or anything else. Now, this is a sort of like a binary email classifier. Now, for this classifier to work in Claude.md, it will be very beneficial if you add 3 different examples, 3 diverse examples. So when I say diverse, show one example of an email that actually belongs to the primary inbox. Show another example of an email that actually belongs to social inbox or update inbox. Or if it's about a product review, show one example of positive review, one example of negative, one example of neutral. Basically, just giving total up to 3 examples covering diverse set of cases. You can give more examples, but in general, there is a huge diminishing return because if you add more examples, those examples are now consuming your context window. It is loaded frequently. You don't want that. But if your task is a very simple classification task, this is enough. But if your task involves quite a bit of reasoning, so a reasoning example is whether you want to approve refund or whether you want to approve some sort of returns, something that involves policy, etc., you should provide some reasoning example. So this is the reasoning example. Customer ordered laptop 45 days ago, and the reasoning for the output is 45 days is greater than the 15-day window, which means it's not eligible for return, right? Return or refund. So now this is not like input and output. So this is input, reason, and output. And you can give 2 or 3 such examples. If you need your agent to execute a complex task. Now, what if your agent requires a specific format of response like JSON or something like that? The best thing is you yourself provide some example of what kind of format you are expecting. Provide some sample JSON objects in your Claude code so that it can follow that. One good example here is of the format is in my project. You can see so here, this folder structure, we don't have to explicitly mention this format. Yeah, see, this folder structure, we don't actually have to explicitly mention this format because this is something that most LLMs already know. But by giving this format, we are kind of reinforcing the structure of this whole project that I want to follow. And I'm reinforcing that apart from Claude.md, ideas v2.md is there, which means if I'm referring to ideas v2.md at the top of the document, my Claude code will not get confused now, not knowing where this ideas v2.md is. It already knows because I'm providing the structure, right? There is one question. These examples can be specified in agents.md, each subagent instead of defining in Claude.md. So some 2 or 3 examples you have to mention in Claude.md. And this example, I mean, it can depend on the task, by the way. If the only task that your Claude code is doing is building an agent for responding, you can mention this in Claude.md. But if these things are part of one sub agent's task, So within an email response agent, let's say one agent is assigned explicitly to classify the email, another agent is assigned explicitly to produce response for an email. If such sub agents are there, in that case, yes, you can mention the examples in agent.md rather than in cloud.md. All right. Okay, now we'll move on to the exercise very quickly, but I just want to show you one example of a poorly designed cloud.md, and I want you to tell me why is this poor. You are a full stack developer, a full stack engineer. This is this. So I'm mentioning the identity sort of, right? I'm mentioning some sort of rules. I am mentioning, I mean, these are some rules. This is in the boundary between rules and knowledge. I'm mentioning some structure, but what is in general the format problem with this whole document? You can see that it's a little bit vague, right? Because it's not leveraging anything about the markdown structure. This might as well be like a cloud.txt. There is no difference because it's not leveraging the fact that there are headings or subheadings. It's neither in XML format, and the details are completely vague. You should see this one. You should design the architecture properly. What does this mean? This doesn't mean anything. This is exactly the kind of instructions that maybe 95% of the people actually give, right? It's like me telling the model don't hallucinate. So this is a very, very vague instruction. A better designed thing will be you will have headings, subheadings, and within subheadings, if there are further subheadings, that should be given. And the technology stack, make it explicit. If you want explicitly Next.js to be used instead of React.js, if you want to use Tailwind CSS instead of something else, and deployment, if you want to do in Vercel, not in Railway, mention that, right? And then this, if you do, your issue is that cloud.md file may become bigger, but it will save you a lot of pain downstream. And in any case, cloud.md file is not going to be entirely fetched all at once, right? So this is an example of poorly designed and well-designed cloud.md. Now let's move into an exercise. So I will share a link with all of you. And here, just paste the API key. I don't have the API key yet. So I have created my own vault for storing my API keys just for quickly referencing. So I'll use one of these Gemini API keys. All right. So now here is we have 3 tasks here. First task is we will sequentially construct a cloud.md file. Okay. Sequentially construct meaning we will define the identity, we will define the rules, we will define some of the knowledge, we will define examples, etc. Yes, I will share the Colab notebook also. So this is the corresponding Google Colab notebook. But as usual, I will, since many people are like product managers and coming from low coding background, I will go through the interactive website. So this is the Google Colab. Again, you will need Anthropic, OpenAI, OpenAI, Anthropic, or Gemini API key. Just you can store it in the env file over here. So this key icon you see, you click that, and here you can add the secret key. So either if it is a Gemini API key, just add it here and just enable it like this by clicking this button. This is the best way to store the API key in for usage in Google Colab. So here, this is the task, okay? We need to create a student grade calculator. Let me just annotate. So this has to follow a certain structure. So when I'm building this calculator, I don't want to use fraction format. I don't want to store numbers as 0.3. I want internally Python to represent it as 3 by 10 or whatever the fraction is. So Python has to follow decimal format instead of following floating point. Then certain constraints like use a lookup table to assign letter grades. So letter grades like A, B, C, D, and then return results as grade reports, or then use, if you want to export the final grades of the students into a CSV file format, use csv.writer, not string concatenation. So there are some specific details I want to follow while building this. So don't get hung up on the details. It's not important. What is important is how the difference look like when you use CLAUDE.md versus when you don't use CLAUDE.md. Okay, so let's see that. So firstly, if you don't have CLAUDE.md, what would be your prompt? Your prompt will be asking a simple user prompt asking LLM to write a grade calculation function, which takes students' marks, and then it should produce a grade score, right? So it'll be like a very simple 1 or 2 or 3 line prompt. But if in presence of CLAUDE.md, you are providing more details. So what I want you to do is, I don't want you to just manually type these things. I have made your life a bit easy. You have a solution button here. Just click this solution. It should automatically populate the project overview, project structure, etc. So project overview is this: a student grade calculator that computes weighted final grades, assigned letter grades, and exports results in CSV format, so and so. Okay. Project structure is the folder structure of your project. So in your SRC, there will be a calculator.py, inside which there will be a calculate final grade function. There is a models.py and so on. So this is the details of the project structure, folder structure of the project. Then some conventions or rule which are provided in our problem statement, I am adding here. All grade uses decimal format, not floating point. Then determine the grades by using the grades cutoff and use the lookup table. Then return the grades in grade report data class, CSV export using CSV.writer, etc. Similarly, in testing requirement, I have mentioned some details, some of which are knowledge, some of which are rules. And one thing I notice is that like some things are repeated multiple times, like do not use float grade for grade calculation, use decimal for precision. This is already mentioned in the, I think, in code conventions themselves. But this is how the full CLAUDE.md will look like if I add each of these sections. Project overview, which is identity; project structure, which is the structure that defines the output; code conventions will define some sort of rules and knowledge. So here is the boundary between knowledge and rules. Testing requirements will again define knowledge and rules. And tools, where are my tools? Here some tools are defined. This grade cutoffs is like a tool. Then a data class, this is usage of a tool. Then CSV.writer is again mention of a specific tool. And here also some rules are mentioned. So in this important patterns, you will see a combination of rules, tools, and knowledge. And this is purely, this section is what? Common mistakes to avoid is what? Is it knowledge or is it rules? This is purely rules, right? So this markdown file will be passed along with, if CLAUDE.md file is used, it will be passed along with the prompt to the LLM. Okay, LLM, which LLM is used? Will be using Gemini. I think 2.5 Gemini Flash 2.5 Flash. So now let's run the code with and without markdown file. I hope this works. I hope it does not hit any API limit or something. Did you guys manage to run this with your API? If you got any output, it compares the output at the end. So I want to show you that also. If any of you manage to get the output, just show me a screenshot. It should show a score out of 25. In the absence of markdown file, how does the output quantitatively look like in terms of a score? How does it look like in the presence of markdown file? So this markdown file is consuming 439 tokens. Okay. Can you add input field for Claude API? Yes. So you have Shivaram, you have an Anthropic API key available to you. I can add a Anthropic option also. The only reason I did not add is because I don't have an Anthropic API key at the moment. I use Cloud Code, but I don't have Anthropic API key. Okay. So Amit, David, okay, 10 out of 25 versus 25 out of 25. For some reason, my API call is taking too long. I don't know why. Okay, glad to know that you guys are getting it fast. So I think mine is running a bit slow. I have no idea why it is so slow. Okay. So one issue that happened earlier was when I had deployed this on Vercel, and okay, so see, now this is the score breakdown. So this time for calculating these scores, I am not using an LLM as a judge. For this, I am simply using keyword based matching my requirements, and then the output will have a set of keywords. So this is the output with CLAUDE.md provided. Okay, output is much longer and much detailed. And this is the output without Claude.md. If you want to see how the prompt provided to the LLM looks like, you can scroll down and click this. We view the full prompt sent to the LLM. So this is the prompt sent to the LLM in the absence of Claude.md. It's too small, it's too vague, not at all specific. So there is no doubt that the LLM will not be performing as good. In this case, the consumption of tokens is like extra 439 tokens are being consumed. There is a question, did we ask Claude to generate Claude.md from natural language? You mean in this case? In this case, I have already, what I have done is this show solution button, right? I have already hard coded a good Claude.md structure that was created using, I think, Gemini itself, not Cloud Code. And then I just enabled this button click so that with a button click, you can add the different subsections of the Claude.md into these project structure, testing requirements parts. And then the whole Claude.md file is basically a concatenation of these different subsections, which is what you see here. And then the prompt in the presence of Claude.md will look over here at the bottom, very long. And here the user message will come at the very end. So this is the user message, write a Python function with so and so. Everything before that is what is there in the Claude.md. So here, basically, the prompt that we are passing to the LLM is concatenation of two things, concatenation of stuff that are put into the Claude.md and with that concatenated with things that are there in the user prompt. So when you are hitting Gemini API, are you just passing the content from Claude.md as the prompt? Exactly. So I'm passing this whole thing as the message to the LLM, this whole thing, the Claude.md info plus the user prompt. User prompt is write a Python function, calculate final grade that computes weighted average of the scores from the scores dictionary and weights dictionary, determines the letter grade and returns the result. That's it. There is no mention about the specific format of CSV export or anything. I'm just saying I need the result in a CSV format. So may I know if we can access the lab as lifetime? Yeah, you can access the lab lifetime. Only thing is you will have to use your own API, your own API key. Now let's move on to the next lab. This is just to show you the difference when you use Claude.md and with and without Claude.md. It's obvious, right? I mean, if you don't provide enough details, of course your output is not going to be really good. You already know that. So, but this is just to show it quantitatively. We can now move on to phase 2. So in this phase 2, let me just refresh. Okay, I think most of you got higher scores in the second case, right? With Claude.md, you got probably 20 or 25. The scores will vary, of course, it's an LLM. But I think most of you might have gotten higher score in general when you used Claude.md instead of not using. Now here, this is a different example, okay? We are not talking about the student exams anymore. We are talking about one more thing, by the way, guys. Some students had messaged me yesterday saying the timing of the lecture is a little bit long because in the US time zone now it's late night 11 p.m. or something in some of the time zones in the US. So one thing I must say already that I think most of the lectures might take more than 1 hour simply because some topics we have to go a little bit deep. So what I'm planning to do is I will try to finish as much as possible by, oh, it's 1:30 a.m. Okay. Oh my God. I don't know what time zones you guys are in, but hats off to you if you are trying to work or study at 1:30 a.m. Amazing, guys. Yeah, so it's a problem with many different time zones. Bunch of the folks are from EST, bunch of the folks are from Central Time Zone, IST, UK. So it's like a bit of a challenge. But that's the reason why I'm putting the recording as fast as possible, so that in case we want to drop off and watch it next day morning, you can do that. Okay, so here the issue is this. We have a chatbot, and that chatbot's response need to be graded on 10 different questions. So these are the 10 questions, okay? I want to return my laptop. This is the order ID. So if this is the question that customer is asking, ideally chatbot should not immediately give a response, right? Ideally, this is the grading criteria. So chatbot should first say that let me look at the order first, and then let me look at the return policy. Then looking at then guessing the return policy, right? So this is one thing. Second thing is, what's the price of new MacBook Pro? then it should not hallucinate. It should look at the price table or something and then come back. Then I'm going to sue you if you don't fix this right now. Should de-escalate the situation. And so and so. So these are some issues which you are going to ask the chatbot, and ask chatbot should be responding. And based on this instruction, we are going to grade the chatbot's response. Now let's see, when we are building the CLAUDE.md file sequentially, like one after the other, what will happen. So first is round one, which is a minimal prompt. So you can click this show solution to add a minimal prompt in CLAUDE.md. So this is just the identity. If you are a customer support agent for Cloud Store, an online electronics retailer, help customers with orders, returns, etc. Be friendly and professional, right? And let's see how the minimal identity prompt will help you help the chatbot score for the 10 queries. So 10 queries are done. If you want to see the scores, go back and scroll down. So in the 10 queries, actually it has scored pretty well. So I want to return my laptop. Either I can definitely help you with returning your laptop. To start the process, you will have a couple of options. Okay, you know why this output is only partly displayed here? Any idea why this is the case? You can only see so much, right? Because I have manually defined a cap for the maximum token limit for each response, so that chatbot will not give a paragraph response. So that is the main reason. So the input plus output should not exceed a certain limit. There might be one problem which I might have to fix here, because in round 4 we are adding more details. But let's see what's the case. So for 2 questions, it's not answering in the correct way. But for the rest of the questions, it's kind of following our guidelines. Now in round 2, we will add one more detail, which are critical rules. So in round 1, it was simply talking about the empathy factor and the identity factor. In round 2, I have mentioned certain critical rules. So these critical rules will hopefully help the chatbot to take better decisions. But let's see, because I have capped my number of tokens, whether the output is becoming weird or not so good or not. See, it's only 8 out of 10. So you know what we should do here to make the output better, or to make the scoring a bit more fair? What I should ideally do is I should increase the number of tokens from whatever the cap is right now to maybe uncapped. So that I will do. And in the last part, I will jump to R4, because I also want to show you one quiz. So here, if you click show solution in round 4, 3 things are added. You are a customer support agent. These are the critical rules. This is the tone in which you should speak. And if there are specific issues that the customers are facing, this is how you should reroute, right? So these 3 things are explicitly mentioned. And when you run again, the problem might happen is that the input tokens plus output tokens are forming the context window. But here, with the edge cases also added, the chatbot is scoring 10 out of 10. So all the questions are being addressed really, really nicely. So we skipped the round 3, but I urge you to try the round 3 also, and just let me know what output you got. So ideally, you should see in round 1 with minimum. So in round 1, we just had minimum prompt in the CLAUDE.md. In round 4, you had all the different instructions. As you go from round 1 to round 4, your score should ideally increase. Of course, sometimes it may decrease. I have noticed that when you go from round 1 to round 2, sometimes, or round 2 to round 3, sometimes the score decreases from 8 out of 10 to 7 out of 10. Not able to see R1 and R2 options. So to go to R1 and R2, you mean after running? If it is after running, just click it once more and then scroll down. If you want to progress from round 1 to round 2, you have to finish round 1, right? There might be some issue in the logic of button enabling or disabling. I will just fix it if there is an issue. The third example, which I want to show you, there is one interesting quiz also, which I want to take you through. But the third example is adding few shot intelligence. So few shot intelligence, in this case, we will start with no examples, some static examples, and dynamic examples. So static example simply means if you are providing 3 examples of what is a good behavior to the LLM, like this. So into the context, you provide example number 1, example number 2. Okay, round 1, 4 out of 10, 3 out of 10, 4. Oh, that's super weird. I will have to check why that is the case. And can you guys tell which LLM are you using? Which model are you using? Is it Gemini or is it OpenAI? GPT-4. Okay. That is weird. I don't know why. Maybe it is because of the truncation of the output. Okay, I can do one thing. I will increase the, I'll just first ensure that there is no truncation of the output and I'll increase the limits. And then hopefully you should get better response. So ideally what you should get is something like in round one, very kind of low score, 6 or 7 out of 10. And eventually as we add more details into the MD file, the chatbot should be able to handle questions in a better way. But of course, the scores itself show that, LLM factor itself is coming in, but it should not be as bad as 3 out of 10. Okay, Sriharsha is sharing. Okay, Sriharsha's score is something similar to what I am getting. I'm also getting something very similar. Sriharsha, are you using Gemini or OpenAI API? Okay. I'm not sure why this issue is, but I'll have to investigate it. But this is ideally what should happen. Like as you add more details, your chatbot should become better at responding. So now talking about the examples, let's say we ask 5 questions to our chatbot. Okay, I want to return my monitor. Order number is this. I bought it 10 days ago. This is the first question. Second question, third, fourth, and fifth. And we can run with no examples provided, meaning no example of how to respond to a query is provided in the markdown file. Then what will happen? So we are now running 5 queries and let's see the score. Okay, so let's go back to baseline. In baseline, this is the first question. This is how the first question was, and this is how the response was. Empathy was not so great. Action, it was not actionable, but it did not guess and it stayed on the topic. If you want to see the full prompt that was actually passed to the LLM, you can click this. The system prompt is this. You are a customer support agent on an online retail seller. Help the customers with their questions. And then the user just give the first user prompt, which is this. I want to return my order number 3301. Okay. So this is the full prompt which we are passing into the LLM. And this is the full response which LLM gave. And this response scores out of 4 rubrics on which we are scoring the LLM. Only 2 are, it's working only for 2. Then my package was supposed to arrive 5 days ago. Still did not arrive. Same thing. The system prompt will remain the same. User prompt will vary. Here also system prompt will remain the same, and user prompt will vary. And please note that these are different API calls. Okay, so for different API calls, context window will be different. Now in static, okay, to click this, I have to first run the baseline. Okay, this is one issue I should fix. I should be able to freely jump from baseline to static. Okay, baseline 2.4 out of 4. Okay, so baseline is almost done. Then let us run to static examples. Okay, now this is static example. So static examples are in different category. There is examples in returns category, in shipping category, product category, complaints category, account category, and in all. So if you are picking 3 examples, would you pick all the 3 from returns or all the 3 from shipping or all the 3 from products, or would you pick it from different sections? If you are only allowed to pick 3, you should ideally pick such that diversity is maximized. That's how LLM can have maximum knowledge about different situations it may encounter. So ideally, if you are picking 1 from returns, do not pick 1 from returns again. If you're picking 1 from shipping, do not pick from shipping, so on. So here 3 are picked: 1 from returns, 1 from shipping, and 1 from complaints. And then we can run static. Basically run static meaning in the prompt which we send to the LLM, 3 things will be there. System prompt will be there along with examples. Then user prompt will be there, which is the sentence, right? So now these are the scores. I should have displayed the system prompt button here also just to see how the prompt look like. But the prompt will look like the following. System prompt is, you are a chatbot for this, be empathetic and helpful. Following that, the example will be concatenated. Then after that, you will have the user query, which is the question like this. Now here, I have not run the dynamic yet, I think. Oh, I have to go to the static just a second. Okay. So here you can see 2.4 out of 4 average. So already, yes, I am displaying the scores here. So in static, these are the scores that I got. in no example, I got 2 out of 4 average score. Here it is 2.4 out of 4, slightly better. And this is the full prompt. This is the system prompt. Then examples of good responses, example 1, example 2, example 3. I am not sure if this is supposed to be user, okay, because user is not giving the example. I think this might be a mistake in the internal coding of how I'm displaying, how I am constructing the full prompt. Ideally, the example is part of the system prompt itself. It is there in the MD file. User is just giving this, the customer prompt. I want to return my monitor order 3301. Okay. So, but look at the total prompt that is appended. It is appended thing about the identity plus static examples plus what the customer is asking, right? And then the full response is over here, and you can score the full response on these 4 rubrics. And in dynamic, let me check my score. In dynamic, I scored 2.8 out of 4. So I got 2 out of 4, 2.4 out of 4, 2.8 out of 4. How are the scores calculated? Good and bad, etc. Do you have API call? No, I don't have this time. I don't have a judge LLM for API call. I am simply doing keyword matching. So keyword matching meaning in my baseline here, where is that? Or I think in the phase 2, I had mentioned how the responses should be, right? In phase 2, I had said when you are crafting the response for returns, always look at the return document. Do not directly give a solution. So that the keywords in that command is matched with the keywords in the solution in the LLM response. And then based on that, a score is constructed. And using that score, I can say whether empathy factor was maintained or not, whether actionable response was provided or not, whether guess was made or not, or whether on topic, whether it stayed on topic or not. The even better way to do this is by using an LLM as a judge, but then often it is not needed. It's also expensive. Here it's not expensive. Here anyway, I'm running 4 examples, but here anyway, it's not an LLM judge. It's a keyword matching. Yesterday, we discussed about the LLM judge. I'm curious to know if any of you got a graph that looks sort of like this. Ideally, with more examples which are dynamic, you should have a better score. And what are the dynamic examples that we fixed? Look at this. When my question is about the returns, most of the examples are about returns. 2 examples are returns. 1 is about complaint. Whereas when I forgot my password and reset the email, then I don't know why this was part of I don't know why these 2 examples are provided. It's anyway showing 0% semantic match, but these 2, I don't know why it's appearing. So ideally, nothing like this should appear. Maybe it's because I am forcing the LLM to pick 3 examples. This also is not RAG. Here also, ideally it will be RAG, but here what I'm doing is keyword matching. So there is no vector database. I mean, keyword matching also you can call as some sort of retrieval, of course. But here I'm not using a vector database. Here I'm purely matching the keywords in the query with the keywords in the examples. And based on the matching of the keywords in the query and keywords in the examples, I am picking which are the best dynamic examples that suit the current situation. And those dynamic examples, along with the query and along with the system prompt, I'm passing to the LLM. And then LLM is producing the output. So right now, the scores are like this for me. I think many people might have gotten something similar. Did anyone get the reverse score? Okay, David, did you get reverse? You got best score in no example and worst score in dynamic. Is that the case? Sriharsha got okay. I have no idea, David, why it happened. It's amazing how how variable LLM's output can be. Sriharsha seems to be getting very similar to what I'm getting. This is the ideal. Okay, I'll tell you one more thing, one more experience from my me running these examples at different examples many times. One thing I have noticed is the LLMs of today are incredibly good, even in the absence of a good system prompt. Okay. And because of that, it's very hard to come up with examples which actually show your point. In general, if you use an LLM 1,000 times, you will form a mental model in your brain that, okay, I need better CLAUDE.md or better system prompt for getting better output. But it's very hard to show that exact same thing for one example. When you pick one example, LLM can behave in such a way that sometimes the response it gives is already good, even in the absence of static or dynamic examples. Maybe that is why, David, you are getting the opposite of result. Like your dynamic case is the worst and baseline is the best. I am very curious to further look at why that is happening. If no relevant examples are there in case of dynamic, how and what would be the output? So in dynamic case, there are relevant examples. You mean, okay, in dynamic case, if 0 examples are provided in the example database, how would the output look like, right? In that case, output will look very similar to what the base output may look like in the case of baseline. In the case of baseline, LLM, if in the system prompt we have mentioned like if some policy or something like that is asked, don't hallucinate, look at the document, and then it looks at the document, no examples are provided, then hopefully it may not hallucinate. Maybe it will reply something like, unless specified, it may reply something like, I'm not so sure what the detail about this particular query is, or something like that. It depends on what other details have you provided in the system prompt. Phase 4 is just looking at all of this in one frame, but we don't have to go through that. We can go through. I just want to show you one last thing. Okay, this is a page which I have created just to show you how the CLAUDE.md file sections are retrieved. So I asked you a question earlier, right? In CLAUDE.md, is the whole MD file passed as part of the prompt into the LLM, or only sections are passed? Actually, only sections are passed. So here, let's say my CLAUDE.md file has 1300 tokens. Okay, 1300 tokens divided into 12 sections. So section about authentication, database, API design, logging, error handling, etc. And how will these sections look like? It will look like things coming under subheadings, correct? Now, if the task that the LLM is supposed to do right now is about, let's say, unit tests for user service, can you tell me, out of these subsections, which subsections will I be utilizing? Which subsections will be retrieved to be passed into the large language model? Is, let's say, database convention needed? Probably not. Testing standards might be needed. Unit test, maybe in the testing, if error, I don't know if error handling is needed or not. Performance guideline is not needed. Naming convention is not needed. Deployment and DevOps is probably not needed, right? So only out of these 12 sections, maybe 4 sections are needed. So let's click this retrieve relevant docs. See, only 4 sections are needed. Testing standards. Oh, actually, naming conventions is coming into the picture here. Maybe because something about the testing is provided here also. So this naming convention is now contributing 110 tokens. Each of these are roughly 110 tokens. So now look at the total number of tokens that are consumed. Instead of 1300 tokens, it's roughly 100 multiplied by 4. Around 440 tokens are being consumed, right? And only these 4 subsections will be now passed into the context. Similarly, if we are asking about React form component, then maybe what we need is front-end architecture. We might need an API design if the form input is passed into some database. Something about database might be needed. Logging and monitoring, I'm not sure if we need. Security practices, yes. So let's run this and see what all sections will be probably used. Front-end architecture is the most obvious. Okay, error handling probably will be used in most of these, because in every case some error can happen. You need some error handling mechanism. API design, if the form is the whatever you input you are putting into the form is sent as a JSON into an API function. Data validation is needed. So again, only 4 sections are being used. So then you can actually run the Claude code with the full context as well as with just the selectively retrieved context. Do you think in this particular example any difference will happen? Okay, again, there is a question. Who is selecting the sections? Sections are, again, as I mentioned earlier, like in the CLAUDE.md file, I said, if I'm working on phase 1, I will select only phase 1 based on keyword matching. So I can select it based on 2 things. So sections from CLAUDE.md can be based on RAG, or it can be based on keyword matching. If it is RAG, I have to chop the CLAUDE.md or agents.md into chunks. Chunks need to be stored in vector database. Then user query also needs to be converted into a vector. Then those vectors are compared using cosine similarity or some Euclidean distance or just dot product. And then when you compare the vectors, you may have top 3 or top 5. then you may re-rank it, and then you will figure out which vector is, or which vectors are closest to your user query. And what are those vectors? Those vectors are chunks from your document. And what are the chunks? Maybe the chunks are different sections. So chunking, how the chunks look like will depend on the chunking strategy. But if your chunking strategy is such that it's based on sections, this will be one chunk. Perhaps this will become another chunk, and so on. Which means each vector, there will be one vector corresponding to each chunk. So if top one vectors are being used for when you are saying, hey, now let us implement phase one, then in phase one, the chunk corresponding to phase one is the vector corresponding to whatever this chunk looks like, right? So phase one will be converted to a chunk that will be stored as a vector. And when sorry guys, my Wi-Fi just got cut off. Can you hear me right now? Am I audible? Is my network okay? Okay. So where I left off is I was discussing about the chunks. So the way this retrieval happens in RAG is RAG will find the most appropriate chunk corresponding to the user query, and those chunks will be passed as the system prompt. Now, my question is, in this particular case, the output difference between using the full CLAUDE.md file versus only the selectively retrieved items are not going to be that different, simply because the number of tokens here are anyway minimal. 400 versus 1300 is not going to make any difference. But if your CLAUDE.md file was so big such that you had 50,000 tokens in that, then it is difficult. This selection is automatically handled by the coding agent. You mean, Nikhil, is this handled automatically by handled? Now let's move on to quiz. 10 minutes on this. Directly, you just answer the question in the chat. Okay, do you guys hear me properly now? I just need to test. Yeah, it is being recorded, so nothing will be lost, but I'm not sure how my internet speed is. Let me just test it once. Okay, not too good, but not too bad. So let's move on to the quiz. This is the first question. Actually, there are 25 questions. It may take a few minutes, but anyways, I think this will be fun. So which system prompt instruction is at the right altitude for handling customer pricing questions? Among this, just answer with A, B, C, D. A, B, C, or D. The problem with A is too vague, so it's too high. B is too specific. D is also vague, so C should be the correct answer, right? Then a system prompt has 5 components: identity, rules, format, knowledge, and tools. You're building a support chatbot but running low on token budget. Which is the component you should cut last? Which should you remove last? So this we discussed in the lecture. Rules are guardrails. We should not remove it. Rules should be removed last. Format, identity, knowledge. If it comes to choosing between these, you have to always keep guardrails, right? So rules you should remove last. Then in CLAUDE.md or AGENTS.md file, which section typically is the highest value per token? This is not something we explicitly discussed in the lecture, but I'll be happy to see your thinking process. So which among this is the most important value per token? A, project overview, project structure, code convention, common mistakes. So this is actually very confusing. The best thing is providing common mistakes to avoid. You know why? Because when you are using Cloud Code to build something, the best is direct something you should and not. This common mistakes avoid you get the model going into loop and producing something which is completely wrong, and then you having to provide feedback again to get back. Oh, do you hear me all right? I'm temporarily on my phone hotspot, but I'm not sure how good this is. I just switch on my camera for the time being, just to save some bandwidth. I think there is some power issue here. All right, let's go on to the next. In the 5-layer context stack, which layer is always loaded into every single LLM call out of these four? Screen is not shared. Oh, let me do once more. All right, how about now? So out of these four, which one is the most common one, which is almost always loaded into the stack? It should be layer one. This already we discussed. But again, please note, agents.md or claude.md are not entirely loaded. Its parts are loaded. Then using few short examples, you are using few short examples for classification. You have a budget of 5 examples. What happens to accuracy as you go from 3 to 5 examples? Marginal improvement, diminishing returns kick in hard after 3. So this actually, there is no proper consensus on this. In some documents, it also says if you add too many examples, what may happen is, so if for example, I'll tell you a situation. Let's say there is positive, neutral, and negative example. If something is, if you are giving one positive, one neutral, and one negative, you are already providing three, right? Three with diversity. Now, if you provide two more, what if those two more are positives? Then you are somehow giving model some information which may not be in the right way. The diversity is lacking. So it can also decrease the model's performance. So C or D can technically be the answer. Marginal improvement is for sure is the case. But in this case, people always say, I mean, this don't take this into account. In general, when you read articles, you will see that models will get confused when you are adding few more examples which are not diverse enough. If all the 5 examples are diverse, it's okay. If 3 examples are positive, neutral, negative, then 2 more examples you add such that they are positive. Now you have 3 positive examples, 1 neutral and 1 negative. Not the best because the diversity suffers, right? So answer can be C or D. Then you have 15 customer support examples in a bank. A user asks about a damaged product. Dynamic selection picks 3 most similar example. Why does this beat static selection? This we already have discussed. So why is 3 dynamic example the best instead of 3 static example? So if it is about shipping, then we don't have to pick example related to something else, right? So you should not be wasting your tokens. The problem with three static example is that in every single call, you are using the same static example. It's not good. The actual problem is that in static example, the main reason is in static example, you are paying more in the form of tokens, in the form of API call for irrelevant context. So that is the main issue. In dynamic selection adds variety, prevents the model from overfitting. It's not about overfitting or anything. Yes, dynamic selection adds variety for sure, but it's not just about overfitting. That's not the main issue. The main issue is static example keep on getting loaded always. This is something which we have not discussed, so I will just skip for the time being. Okay, how about this? Anthropic recommends start minimal and then add for system prompt. A colleague argues it's faster to write a comprehensive prompt already, like writing a CLAUDE.md file, the full file already, without having to write it one by one. What's the issue with this? The problem is that the rules which you define in the beginning are not the rules that you come across based on your experience. You are speculating some things might be the rules, and you may or may not end up writing a good CLAUDE.md file, right? So this is the main issue. But if you are already clear of what exactly you want to build and you have thought about it a lot, then in my experience, you can write CLAUDE.md in one shot also. But in general, if you have no idea what you are building and if you don't know where you will be going after 5 steps, it's better to start with minimum CLAUDE.md file. In agents.md, files can be nested in subdirectories. This we discussed. Example, repo slash root in the root and then in the src slash API. How does this hierarchy work? Only the deepest is loaded. Then root is always used. Subdirectory is ignored. Tools pick whichever agents.md is closest. All agents.md are concatenated with deeper files adding to or overriding parent rules. Clearly, this is a confusing question. Everybody is answering different things. So if A was the, let's think about different scenarios. If only the deepest agent.md is loaded, the problem is bunch of rules defined in the parent. There is a reason why we are calling it as a rule. So clearly A is not probably the answer, right? I can just click it. In general, what happens is all MD files are considered. But if there is a rule in the later part of hierarchy, which is kind of uh, different from the rules defined in the earlier top level of hierarchy, the later agents.md files are being used. The rules mentioned in the later agents.md files are used. Why? Because if an agent is writing something related to API calls, the rules mentioned here will override, in case if there is a conflict, the rules mentioned here will override the rules mentioned here. So, but all the rules, everything mentioned here as well as here will be used. Then which few short patterns should you use when the model needs to apply multi-step policy? Example, determining refund eligibility based on order date, product type, condition, etc. Because this is a complex, this sort of like a not an easy classification or something, right? It's complex. So you will have to give chain of thought. You give the problem, you give the reason, you give the solution, and this you provide in the examples. Then your system prompt is 5200 tokens. According to best practices, what should you do? System prompt, you can think of it as prefix, suffix. Let's go back. Which few short pattern should you use when the model needs to apply a multi-step policy? Input output pairs, prefix suffix, show the output to structure, output structure to complete. Prefix suffix is what we discussed, the third type of example. So if you want a JSON file, show the full output. Like if this is the request, this is how the JSON file should look like. Prefix suffix is just a complex word to describe the structured output format which you are expecting when you are expecting code output, code or some other format. If you have a specific writing style or something for a documentation for your company, you have to provide that specific style. Uh, Chain of thought is when you want your model to make a decision regarding something which is complex. Input output pair is mostly used when you have some classification, very simple task. 5200 tokens. What's the best practice? Would it be compressing Or would it be like splitting CLAUDE.md and system prompt plus having a dynamic RAG-based retrieval? Of course, it will be RAG-based retrieval. This is what we discussed earlier. So it should not be that every single thing is put in persistent memory, or it should not be that every single thing is dynamic. You need persistent memory as well as you need RAG. Then you are selecting 3 few shot examples from a bank of 20. Which selection principle matters the most? This we already discussed. We need diversity, right? So let's go ahead. Okay, you build a chatbot and it has great response. It scores 9 out of 10. But after deploying, after a month, the accuracy drops to 5 out of 10. You haven't changed the prompt or anything. What might have happened? Is it about model silently updating the weights, or real users ask different questions than your test user? Prompts was overtrained on tests. Production latency causes the model to generate slower. So it's not about model weights or anything. Model might still remain the same. It's more about when a customer is having long conversation with a chatbot over a few weeks, all those things might be stored, right? And then the longer the conversation, just like ChatGPT, when you are chatting in the same chat window, your context is getting rotten because, oh, let me check B. B is also possible. Real users ask different questions than your test set. Sure. I mean, yes. Ideally, when you are building a chatbot, you would already consider real users' data. For example, when we are building an email response agent, I'm already taking real responses into consideration. But you are right in the sense that a new question coming in the email can be completely different from what we have seen already. I'll just switch on my camera for a moment. If my bandwidth is getting slowed down, just let me know. Then in the start minimal and then add, your round one chatbot hallucinates order details. What is the correct round two fix? Meaning in the round one, minimal things are there. In round two, what else will you add? Will you add something like never hallucinate or make up information? Will you add 5 few short examples? Will you add something like, if something is about order retail, have a function called? So you will go with C, right? Fairly straightforward. Okay, how about this? Your CLAUDE.md is 1200 lines. So my CLAUDE.md was 260 lines. So 1200 is almost 6x the size of that. What would you do in this case? Keep it more context is better, or should you not do it? Lost in the middle is definitely a risk, right? We discussed this earlier. And higher API cost will also be there because you are passing the same set of 1200 lines in every single. So A or B or both can be the risk. The highest risk is more than, even if you are, let's say, not so worried about the cost, lost in the middle is the biggest risk because your quality might degrade. Chatbot keeps hallucinating on the orders. You add the rule never hallucinate. It doesn't help. What's the issue with this? It's basically very vague. So it's like a too high altitude. Don't hallucinate is a vague term with no example or no, it doesn't say anything to even a human, right? We have no idea what does it mean. You have 3 few short examples all showing positive sentiment classification. You add 2 more positive. I think this we had already discussed in one of the earlier questions. What happens to accuracy? Will it stay the same? Will it get worse? It can stay the same. It can get worse also, right? A or D can be the answer. No effect few short examples only influence the few categories, the exact categories shown in them. The model already knows other, okay, it stays the same. The model already knows other categories from its training data. Okay, A does not training, it's not about training data. It improves slightly more examples, help always get model calibrate regardless of category. It gets worse, model over indexes the positive. Let's try with D. D is the correct answer. The thing here is like here all the issues are there. Sometimes the model the chatbot can become worse because you are giving more useless examples. Sometimes it can get better depending on the context. um, okay, how about this? Which layer of the context stack has the highest impact? Which has the highest impact on your output quality? Okay, the question is a little bit tricky. Let's go with C and see what it says. There could be, so what is tricky about this is, but teams most often skip or underinvest in. The reason why teams underinvest is because people want to build very soon, right? People are so fast, like they don't want to wait until a proper Cloud.md is constructed. But however, teams also usually under invest in providing good examples. This I know from experience. So it can be layer 1 or layer 4, both. But what always gets loaded is something from cloud.md and or agents.md is almost always loaded, which means it answer can be a layer 1 or layer 4. We're almost at the end. When a system prompt says be formal and professional, oh, A2, let's see A. Layer 5 dynamic tool results. One thing is RAG. If your chatbot requires RAG, I know that people spend time on it. In the sense, like if you are building a tool for which you know RAG is needed, that part people generally work on. But people are too lazy to give examples from their past, um, interactions with the humans or with other people through your email system or through your chat system. The human to human communication example. That part is where people are a bit lazy, I have seen. We have worked with many different companies building RAG-based chatbots. So in general, I mean, yes, any of this can be an answer because this is vague. But layer 4 is something where people are a bit lazy. When a system prompt says be formal and professional, a few short example demonstrates casual friendly tone, which does model typically follow? This is a tricky question. The system prompt says this, but the example says this. So what type of tone will be followed by the model? It's a little bit tricky question. So in general, what happens is if you provide examples, example is something where the human is showing how I want things to be in a more concrete way. What you define in system prompt is not in this case in system prompt of B format, formal and professional, is not some concrete thought of the human. It's a vague set of words that describe a concrete example, right? So in general, what happens is if you provide system a few short example, it always has a very high priority. However, this also depends on the example. Again, I will reiterate, this is not physics. Large language model output is just like it's like psychology or something. I don't know what to call it. But because it's not physics, sometimes when you run, you might also end up with a case where system prompt is given higher priority, right? But these are based on um, generalized large number of examples or statistics. Static few short selection weighs about 30% of the tokens. Yes, also may vary from model to model, as you yourself have seen in this data in the experiments we conducted today. Static few short selection weighs about 30% of the tokens on irrelevant context. What technique does dynamic example selection use to fix this? So in dynamic example, what we do is we use RAG to retrieve the appropriate examples or appropriate sections from the cloud.md file, right? So we can just go with A. So this is straightforward. Almost the last three questions. You wrote a comprehensive 800 token system prompt covering 20 different scenarios, but only scores 6 out of 10. Then a colleague starts with 3 lines and iterates to 400 tokens. So instead of 800 tokens, you have 400 tokens, scoring 9 out of 10. What could be the issue? This we discussed earlier. You want to start building slowly and then build on top of each other. Otherwise, the rules which you have provided might contradict each other, right? Because in the beginning, when you are giving it in one shot, you are speculating a lot of things without experience. Um, and then you need to aggressively reduce your system prompt to 400 tokens. What is the component can you most safely remove first? What would it be? It cannot be A, right? A is unsafe to remove. Rules are very important. Let's see what says if it is format, uh, whether the model's output is format issue. Identity is the safest to cut first. Model can often infer it from the its role from the rules, examples, conversation, etc. Format can default to natural language if you don't provide the format properly, in the sense that if you are expecting JSON format, you have to tell that it should be a JSON format. um, Otherwise, most often the default format of LLMs is natural language. And identity is like what you are. It is usually provided, as you have seen in our CLAUDE.md markdown files. It's in one paragraph, right? Then identity token is less compared. Okay, that's a very good thing. Yes, for sure, for sure. Identity is much smaller in terms of token consumption compared to format. Yes. In general, if you are asked just, hey, cut one of these, then maybe you want to cut identity. If you are to say cut one or two, but maximize the amount of tokens that you are eliminating from the context, then maybe you will cut identity and format. This you will not do in practice, by the way. Okay. In practice, your CLAUDE.md file will not become the bottleneck. Bottleneck will be something else. Mostly it might be tool descriptions or stuff like that. You have confirmed your chatbot suffers context rot, performance degrades, which fix directly addresses the issue. Would you increase the model's context window? Would you reduce system prompt? Or would you re-inject key system prompts? Or would you add few short examples? It's again a little bit tricky. We know some things. Reduce the system prompt under 100 tokens is a little bit aggressive, in my opinion, because 100 tokens is like 100-ish words. It's like a small paragraph. I don't know if that will do the best. Increase model's context window is not under your control. Let's try with C. C is not the correct. Periodically re-inject key system prompt. I mean, here we don't have to believe the answer that this MCQ app is giving. Okay, it can be either of these. In my mind, it's not D. That much I am clear. It's too small. 100 tokens is too small. Increase model's context window. No, it's not a solution. Maybe we can re-inject system prompt, but then re-injecting, you have to decide when you are going to re-inject, how much of the system prompt you are going to re-inject. But in general, if the performance is degrading, what I have done in my email chatbot, I have sometimes seen the performance degrades. Then what I added is I added some examples as part of system prompt, which will also help me as a rule. So some rules were something like never refer to some links before 2025 November. So this was something which I explicitly added after I noticed that some performance is degrading. So there, it's a clear example, because which link is before 2025 and which link is after 2025, the model knows. But I'm explicitly saying, hey, before this date, if you are referring to the links, don't do that. Refer to the newer links. So that was an example of D, but then it could be A also. Last question. Common mistakes to avoid section is considered the highest value section in CLAUDE.md. Why does telling the model what not to do work so well? Models have built-in negativity bias. It encodes tribal knowledge from code reviews that model cannot discover by reading code base. Negative rules are shorter and more token efficient than equivalent positive rules. I am not sure if C is true or not. I have not read this anywhere. I don't know. Model uses elimination strategies. Knowing what to avoid narrows down the solution space more efficiently. Here again, B or D could be answer in my opinion. Let's try D and let's see what the answer that this MCQ app is saying. It says D is a better answer. It encodes tribal knowledge. Let's read the description. The model can learn code patterns, naming conventions, and project structure by reading the source files. But it cannot learn, never use raw SQL here. Always use query builder, or don't use floating point financial calculations. That knowledge only exists in the developer's heads and code review comments. Anti-patterns encode this tribal knowledge. So by tribal knowledge, it means the knowledge of the humans who came before Cloud Code. Options A and D sound plausible, but are not how models work. Option C is factually correct. D, I don't know what's wrong with D. D sounds correct in my opinion. Model uses elimination strategies. Knowing what to avoid narrows the solution space more efficiently than knowing what to do. This is arguable whether it is D or C. most of the time it requires more evaluation to choose the option or approach. I did not understand the question. Most of the time it required more evaluation to choose the option or approach here. What do you mean evaluation, Ranganathan? If you can elaborate, I did not fully understand. Let me check if any other questions are there. Will these MD files, okay, will these MD files have any role once the app is deployed? Will this MD file reside until the app is deployed? Very, very good question. Think about it. In my production, okay, when I'm deploying my email tool in production, I don't have Anthropic API. So I am not using Cloud Code at all, right? I'm using OpenAI API or Gemini API. So the way files are referred to in production environment is very different from the way files are referred to when you are in development mode. Because in development, when you are local hosting, your files reside locally. You could still use Cloud Code, or even if you are not using Cloud Code, the way the files are referred to are much different. So before you move from development to production, you have to ensure that the files which you have created, markdown files or txt files or whatever it is uh, it is explicitly mentioned in what folders it will be provided, and that should be passed as a prompt into whichever LLM you are using. So this is one issue which we are also facing. We have not perfected the way in which how to make production better. So what we do is, if we build internal tools for our internal purposes, which is not customer facing, what we do is we always use it in development mode. We don't push it to production. That way, I don't have to make any changes. So what do? I have an Amazon, I mean AWS EC2 instance, and on that EC2 instance, I have bunch of agents. Everything is in development mode. I will put it in local host. Whenever I have to use, I will use it through the local host. I don't put it into production, because into production I have to optimize a few more things regarding how the different MD files are referred by OpenAI's LLM or by Google's LLMs. If Claude.md sections are not fully loaded, then is that Claude agent that picks the important chunks required to feed LLM? Yeah, it is Claude agent who picks the important parts based on RAG or keyword match. It is mostly based on keyword match. RAG is rarely done. Who will decide or define? So unless we explicitly define that it should be based on RAG, it's almost always based on keyword match. Would you be able to share collab link or Verser link to people on free plan when you upload the video into the portal? So the links are exclusively for the engineer students and the industry professional plan students. Will these, then what else is there? I think most of the questions are covered. Some, if you have any other question which I have not addressed, or if you want to know details about anything else, just drop an email at hello@vizuara.com. We will get back. I'll take a couple more questions. Do you think it is better to split Claude.md into multiple files like skill.md and knowledge.md? I haven't seen that done yet. The thing is, see, we are all discussing about context engineering right now in March of 2026. I'm pretty sure maybe one third of the things that we are discussing today may not be relevant maybe 5 months down the line, right? So maybe something might evolve where the way cloud.md is handled is completely different. Maybe it's split into different files. It's all the things that we are discussing right now are the things that are working at the moment, right? It's not some universal forever unchanging structure of giving information to agents. That sorry about that. I think my power issue came back. Okay, how about now? Do you hear and see me all right? Okay, awesome. So just do one thing. Just try the quiz once yourself. specific homework for today. One thing you should try is this. Try installing Claude. If you have, try taking the $20 subscription, if not for forever, at least for now, or even API, Anthropic API if you can. My credit card is not allowing me to take the Anthropic API. That's the reason why I don't have it. But if you have API, you can just put $5 or something in credits. And then try making CLAUDE.md file yourself with minimum instructions in one case, with more instructions in another case. So just like how I did, ideas.md converted into CLAUDE.md. Try both approaches to build a very basic application. The very basic application could be any website which performs a certain task, or it could be like a certain file structure, or like a compiled PDF document, something like that, and see the quality difference in the output. In general, when you are working on any app using Cloud Code, first half an hour or 45 minutes, most likely you will spend such that your Claude.md file is perfect. Only after that, you will be spending your time on rest of the files. App or tool for voice to text is Whisper Flow, WISPR Flow. So, all right, everyone, I think we can wind up here today. So starting at 8:30 or 9 a.m. in IST will be a bit difficult because there is a scheduling conflict there for me. But let me figure out what else is the solution. The other solution is for those of you from the US with crazy hours like 1:30 a.m. to 2 a.m. I'm wondering if lecture should be split or not, but then it will prolong the whole program. That's the other. Let me think about what could be a good solution. We don't have class on Friday. Okay, daylight saving starts. Okay. It already started, or is it about to start? The daylight saving. Okay, started, right? So if it had not started, was it better or worse? Okay. All right. Yeah, I know that for Indian folks, this is the best timing. But yeah, I'm sorry, guys. It's like a crazy cohort. Like everyone from different parts of the world is there. So what I would say is like you can drop off the call as like whenever you wish. Like no hard feelings. Like, and then I will post the recording as soon as I can, and then we will resume the next day. Yeah, 8 a.m. I wish it was a bit earlier. The only thing is I have a unchangeable scheduling conflict till around 9:15 a.m. IST. So the latest I can start is like around 9:15 a.m. That's the only issue. Otherwise, I would have kept it a bit earlier. Yes, the link to the day one app I have changed. I have put it on the website now. It's a different link. All right, then, everyone. Thank you so much. We will meet again tomorrow. So tomorrow we will discuss RAG, and tomorrow we will be coding a RAG-based chatbot or RAG-based, a PDF chunk fetching application almost from scratch. So this time we may use Cloud Code a little bit. I'm primarily thinking of coding it in Google Colab. So let's see. I'll decide later today. But tomorrow we will study about RAG. Day after tomorrow we will study about MCP, Model Context Protocol. Thank you so much, everyone. We will meet tomorrow same time. Friday we don't have lecture. So day after tomorrow is Thursday. Then after that we will meet on next Monday. All right, everyone. Take care. Bye.